Before I was ever a doctor, I was actually a patient. And when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with a disease called lupus. How many of you guys know what lupus is or have heard of it? Okay, so some of you have, some of you haven't. So lupus is an autoimmune disease. So what that means is it's a disease where your body's immune system suddenly stops recognizing self from non-self, right? So normally your immune system is there to protect you. It's there to, if you get a bacterial infection or a viral infection, it's supposed to go out and kill that virus or kill that bacteria, right? Keep you safe and healthy. But when people get sick with autoimmune disease, they generate so much inflammation in their body that their immune system gets confused. And instead of protecting them, their immune system starts going out and finding new things to attack that actually belong to them. So symptoms of autoimmune disease really vary, and the way they diagnose them depends on which antibodies you get and which parts of your body get attacked. But really, it's all the same thing in my mind. And for me, I had lupus, which can affect a lot of different organs in your body. And for me, they attacked my kidneys. So when I was diagnosed at 16, I went to the doctor because I had arthritis everywhere. I had it in my knees. It would move around. It would go from shoulder to shoulder. It would end up in my fingers where it was hard to hold my pencil in class. And that was bothersome, but I didn't know what it was. I wasn't too worried about it yet. And then I developed a rash across my face one day when I was out in the sun. People with lupus often have photosensitivity where being in the sun makes us worse. My dad has something called dad science. Any of you guys have dads that kind of make stuff up and they think that it's science? Yes. Okay. So my dad has this dad science, and he looked at me and he saw this rash across my face and he said, I think that the skin is the window to your body. And if there's something wrong with your skin, then there's probably something wrong inside. Now, I actually teach this now. So this science, he was actually on track on this one. But I ended up at the hospital, and my primary care doctor met us there, and she quickly identified that this was lupus. Now, my blood tests then showed that my kidneys were failing. And that was actually a lot scarier. So by the time I was diagnosed, they immediately sent me in the next day for a kidney biopsy. So I was in stage 4 kidney failure already. So what they told me was that I was 6 months away from complete kidney failure, and I was either going to be on dialysis or wouldn't make it at all. So this was all very sudden. I thought I was healthy, and next thing you know, they're planning for dialysis. And it was, even as difficult as it was for me to process, it was much more devastating for my family. I understand now that, when one person is sick, it's like the whole family feels it, right? It's not just one person who goes through it. And a lot of times I felt like I could handle it better than my family could. My family is all immigrants. They were Holocaust survivors. My mother came in on a boat through Ellis Island back when they did it that way. And so I was born to live the American dream. That's what my family wanted. And so I'm an only child. My parents couldn't afford to have more kids. And so I was going to have everything that nobody else wanted or could have. They wanted, but they couldn't have. And here I was at 16 years old and devastatingly ill. And my grandfather had just died a couple of years before of cancer. And it was really too much. It was too much for everybody, My mom was really strong. She used to always tell me, she kept me focused, that this is something you have to deal with, but this isn't who you are. And you're going to finish high school, and you're going to go to college, and you're going to do all these things. So you better figure out how to study, because at the time, the only thing that they could figure out to treat me with was, this was back in the early 90s. So they didn't have all the fancy medicines they have now. It was mostly steroids. And they knew with my level of lupus and the kidney failure, steroids wasn't going to be enough. So they were going to try something experimental at the time, which was to use chemotherapy to shut off my immune system. Now, what disease do you normally think of when you hear chemotherapy? Cancer, right. And so cancer is a poison that's supposed to kill off cells that are reproducing too quickly, which is what cancer is. But the side effect of chemotherapy is that it shuts off people's immune systems, which is why people with cancer often die of infections. So they thought, well, if your immune system is killing you, maybe if we shut it off on purpose, we can stop this illness. Like Control-Alt-Delete for folks who used to have old computers, right? Like whenever something's wrong with your phone or computer, what do? You just shut it off, right? And then hopefully when it comes back on, it's like magic, everything's okay. So they thought maybe that will work for the human body because you didn't have lupus before. Maybe if we do this with the medicines and it doesn't kill you, maybe your immune system will work again. And so that was the plan. Now, they still use chemotherapy for lupus nephritis, which is what it's called. and with mixed results. You know, Selena Gomez, she has lupus, and she did the chemotherapy and it didn't work, and she ended up with a transplant anyway. So they got me on the chemotherapy, but they didn't know how much to use because it was still experimental at the time. So they said, well, you know, nowadays people use it for a few weeks, maybe a couple months. But for me, they used it for 2 years straight. So I was one of the lucky early people to try it, because what happened was the chemotherapy would start and my lupus would get better because my immune system would shut off. And then they would stop the chemo and then my immune system would get right back to where it was and my kidneys would start failing again. So it took 2 years straight before it actually worked. And that was 16 through 18 while everyone else was worrying about prom and boyfriends and stuff. I'm trying to plan how to study for my AP biology test because I got chemo Friday, so the weekend's going to be shot. So I got to get my studying done early. And that's really what I did. I was already a nerd before I got sick. But at this point, it was the only thing that kept me going was, well, you know, if I just study and read my books, maybe one day I can do something important with my life for however much time I have. And so I thought, well, maybe I can just really study hard and maybe I could be a doctor one day. And however long I'm alive, I can take care of people and help people and my life will have mattered in some way. So that was the plan. And my mom really was so key to helping me do that. You know, she was always there to say, hey, it could always be worse, although sometimes that got me annoyed. But she'd say, it could always be worse. You have so much going for you. You're going to get through this, you know, and she just never let me focus on my illness. But I could still hear her crying in her room at night. And my grandmother, I actually just lost her at 99. She lived a long life. But my grandmother, it's burned into my memory, seeing her on the kitchen floor, on her knees, just screaming and praying to God to take her and spare my life. So I'm going to give away the ending and let you know I made it. But, well, thank you. I'm so glad you guys are happy about that. I appreciate that. All right. But, you know, it was really tough. It was tough on all of us. But I made it through. And I always give this advice to folks who are struggling, whether it's with illness or with something else, financial stressors or relationship issues, to remember that your stressors and the things that you're struggling with, don't let those things define you. Don't let those things define your life. You were born with a gift. I think all of us are born with a gift we're meant to give, and you have to focus on your purpose and your passion and the relationships that matter to you and not on the struggle. Because if the struggle becomes your life, it's already over. And that's what worked for me. And the cool thing was, after 2 years, I did finally go into remission. So how many of you guys know what remission is? Is it a cure? No. So remission means your disease is currently not killing you. And I was all for it. I was there for that. That's good. So when I was in remission, I still had lupus. Every blood test I took showed I had lupus, but it was stable. And my kidneys were stable, and that was worthy. I mean, every time I had tests done, I still had protein in my urine, which showed that I had some kidney damage, but I was considered stable at the time. I was able to stop chemotherapy finally. And a week after my last chemotherapy was my first day of college. I actually, in spite of all of the things I'd been through and all the medications I took, I was able to graduate in the top 10 of my class. I got a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon, and I was really, really excited to be a normal kid just going to school instead of going to school and doing chemo. That was really nice. And so that's what I did. And I actually managed to stay in remission in college because I listened to my doctors, which it's rare. I was taught, my family taught me to always do whatever your doctor says. I have yet to meet patients that were taught the same thing that I was taught. But, you know, they told me, you know, take your medicine, avoid stress, avoid sunlight, and get enough sleep. I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so sunlight wasn't an issue. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. There's no sunlight there. And I did. I made sure I got enough sleep. If I didn't get enough sleep, I'd wake up with my arthritis pain. I'd take my pills for that. I'd be okay. But I managed to stay stable through all of college, which was really exciting. I really wanted to stay healthy. And then it was the first time I didn't listen to my doctors because they told me, always make sure you get enough sleep and always avoid stress. And so I decided to go to medical school. So that is not the best way to follow that advice. And actually, I did get sick again in medical school. I was just determined, though. I just felt in my heart that that's what I wanted to do. And so I went to medical school. And at the time, we didn't have all the laws that protect med students now with hours. So now you're not allowed to work med students longer than 80 hours a week. But that wasn't in place when I was a student. So at one point, I realized I was working about 100 hours a week. And I was just so exhausted all the time. And I started getting weird symptoms. It wasn't the symptoms I had before, they were new ones. But I had these little red dots in all my fingernails. And I started getting double vision, like the entire world splitting in half double vision, where I could see it side by side. And whenever it happened, I just have to hold on to the wall and wait for the world to come back together again. And maybe it would take 30 seconds or so, maybe a little longer. I'd just stand there kind of dizzy, and then it would come back together. And I'd go on with my day, a little bit disturbed by that. So I went and told one of my attendings at the time. So when you're a medical student, you have doctors that are in charge of you, and they're called attending. So I went to my attending and I said, listen, I think something's really wrong with me because I have these dots in my nails. I'm getting double vision. I have lupus. Something's wrong. And she said, you're probably fine. Med students always think they have everything. And now this is true. I mean, I had a roommate in medical school, and she was convinced for months that she had an inflamed prostate. And I was like, no, I don't think that's it. So, but it is true. I mean, med students are notorious for whatever chapter they're on, they think they have that. I was the opposite. Every chapter I was in, I'm like, nope, I don't want that either. No, that, you can keep that, because at the end of every chapter it said people more likely to have this disease are, and then lupus was always there. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that one either. So I didn't want that. But I knew something was wrong, and they weren't listening. I went, well, Thanksgiving break's coming. I'll just go see my doctors then and find out what this is. And I didn't make it to Thanksgiving break. A few days later, I was in the family practice clinic, and I was just giving flu shots and stuff all day and doing stuff like that. And I was charting at one point, and I remember I was sitting at the chart, and I suddenly just felt really disconnected. It's hard to describe. I felt like I was kind of dreaming, and I remember sitting there trying to figure out if I was awake or dreaming. I couldn't figure it out. And I was trying to figure out, did I give all those shots today, or did I dream that I gave the shots? Maybe I'm home right now. And I remember looking at the resident, and he looked at me, and I couldn't talk. Like I wanted to say something and ask him, and I couldn't say anything. And I heard this kind of buzzing in my ears, and I don't know what happened after that, because the next memory I have, I was waking up and I was on the chart. I was sleeping on the chart, and the whole room was empty. The clinic was empty. And so obviously the doctors saw a med student passed out on a chart and didn't think anything of it because we worked 100-hour weeks. So they probably just thought I was sleeping. But I remember I woke up and I was still confused. But all I could think about was, I just want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. So I went and picked up my keys, and I got in my car. And I had this Jeep, because it's Pittsburgh, so you have to be able to drive with all the snow. And I start the car, and I don't know how to get home. I'm trying to think about it, and I don't know how to get home. So I remember driving really slowly, like 5 miles an hour, stopping at every intersection to see if anything looked familiar. And I actually worked only a couple miles from the clinic. So I kind of think my cerebellum took me home. You know how sometimes you end up somewhere and you don't know how you got there because you were busy talking or doing something, and you're like, oh, I'm here. So there's an unconscious part of you that remembers things. And I think that's how I got home. And I parked up on the curb, and I went and passed out in my apartment. And I felt better after about 10, 12 hours of sleep, but I obviously wasn't okay. And so I went to my doctor's, and I found out that the lupus was active again, but now I had a new antibody. Instead of attacking my kidneys, it was creating blood clots. So I was actually sending blood clots into my brain, and that's why I was getting double vision, and I had something called a mini stroke, or a transient ischemic attack, where you have a clot that goes through your brain, but then it dissolves again. It doesn't stay and turn into a major stroke. So they're considered temporary, and they told me that there was no permanent damage. I still think that I was smarter before and funnier now, but they insist there wasn't permanent damage done. But this was terrifying, because for me, I had already made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to live a very long life. I just met somebody yesterday at the beach. I was watching the sunset, and a guy told me his cousin just died of lupus in her 50s. So I knew I wasn't going to live a long life, especially now that I was a med student. And I knew that I could never have children. Because that would kill me, either with a kidney failure or now with blood clots. I mean, being pregnant is a stroke risk in itself. So they told me I could never have children. So all these things are going through my mind. But for me, even with knowing those things, not having kids, not living long, my brain was the one thing I always counted on. Because I figured even if I was in a wheelchair, I could still practice medicine. I could still function because my brain was what I had. I was funny, I was smart, I could keep those things. But if I have a stroke, I could lose everything I ever thought I had. So I was really upset, and I cried for about 2 weeks straight. Just really mourning it. And I think it's important to mourn when things go wrong. You don't want to just suppress it and put it away. And I mourned it. And then I finally got back to that place where I always live in my heart, which is a place of gratitude that, you know what, I can't choose the things that happen to me. But one, I'm still not dead. So lupus didn't get me yet. Right? Well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I was not dead. Not dead is good, right? Two, there was a medicine that could help me. So they told me I'd have to inject myself in the belly every day for the rest of my life to make sure that my blood stayed thin and I wouldn't have clots. But don't fall down and hit your head because you'll bleed into your brain. But at least I had that medicine. And, you know, I could keep going. I could keep going. And I thought, you know, I just got my first choice of residency out in California. I was going to be I was leaving to go towards the sunshine. I decided I was done with winter and I wanted to, you guys can relate, right? So I wanted to go somewhere where I could see sunlight again. And how many people get to live their dream? My dream was to become a doctor and I was only months away from it and I was going to achieve my dream. And so I just felt so lucky again. And I learned that from my grandmother. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor and her whole life she would always tell me I'm a lucky girl. She was a lucky, and she meant it because she had family, you know, and she had love in her life, and she never stayed in the past. She always stayed in the present with what she had. And so I just felt like a lucky girl again. And I decided to embrace that. And I just took my shots and I kept going. And my grandmother was so scared that she wouldn't get to see me grow old, but she actually got to see me graduate medical school. So this is my grandma. She always looked really good for her age. You can see I still had lupus. I had the big cheeks from the steroids. Steroids give you these big fat chipmunk cheeks. There's my mom and my other grandmother. And yes, my dad's 6'7". As everyone asked me that. So it was really exciting. I was living my life and I was so happy. And then something happened that felt like the luckiest thing still to this day that's ever happened to me. I fell madly in love. Anybody ever been in love before? So this is Thomas Tadlock, and gosh, we've been together 15 years now. But he is the most amazing human I've ever met. And we fell in love really, really fast. I mean, it was about a month later where he was talking to me about getting married. Now, I would love to marry this man, but I hadn't really talked to him about the lupus yet. And it wasn't because I was hiding it. It was just, you don't meet a gorgeous man and start with the lupus story. You know, like we talked about music and dancing and stuff like that. But I didn't know that this was going somewhere where I had to bring that stuff up. I never like to focus on my illness. I like to focus on everything else. So at this point, I had to tell him, though, because he's talking about committing his life to me. So I had to tell him, listen, I have this disease. I'm sick right now with it. I take a lot of medicine. And I'm not going to live a long life. In fact, as I get older, I'm going to become disabled and you're going to have to take care of me. I can never have your children. And I understand if you want to back out and maybe at 28 years old, choose somebody else that you can have a long life with. And he just looked at me, tears in his eyes, and he said, I'd rather have a short life with you than a lifetime with anybody else. So I said, oh my God, let's get married. So we decided to get married in Maui because why not get married in Hawaii, somewhere beautiful? And we're really excited about it. And we just wanted to invite our best friends and our parents and my grandmothers and his sister. That's it. Just the people who would cry, he said. And so now I had to think about a wedding dress, right? Now, I was currently an intern at the hospital, and I was on the perfect diet to be overweight and sick. It's called hospital food. Have you ever had that? Yeah. So I was able to exercise less than I used to. I'm eating horrible hospital food. I'm gaining weight. And, you know, it's no big deal because the white coat goes all the way down and it hides everything, you know? So that was fine. But going to Maui, there was going to be photographs. I was going to be in my bathing suit. I was going to be in my wedding dress. I wanted to look good. And so I asked my husband if he would train me. Now, my husband is a celebrity trainer. At the time, he was training people on MTV to give them a six-pack in 4 weeks because they've been partying too hard and they had a beer belly. And they would take him from Pittsburgh and fly him into Manhattan to go in and help train people for MTV. So I'm like, well, I'm in LA now. But I didn't look like an LA girl yet. So I was like, can you help me out? And he said, okay, so this is what we did. So he went to Carnegie Mellon as well for science, computer science, and then switched into getting his master's degree in physical health and training. And he was really mad when he was getting his master's degree and they kept telling him different diets work for different people. And he's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Because in computer science, when you put a program in, every time you enter a program, you get the same answer. And he's like, and cells are just like computers. Every human has the same kind of cells, so every program should run the same way. And so he applied his computer science education to the human body, and he figured out a way to create a fast metabolism in everybody. So if you have a fast metabolism, you can lose fat faster, you can gain muscle faster. So I asked him to apply that to me. Now the only difference he made in my diet was that at the time he was telling people to do really high amounts of raw vegetables, no problem. Really high amounts of omega-3s, no problem. High water intake, I can do that. And then free range meat for protein. I'd been a vegetarian since I was 12 because I loved animals. I was a cheese and egg and processed fooditarian since I was 12. So he said, okay, fine, you got to get rid of all the saturated fat or you'll never lose all that weight. So no more of that eggs and dairy. And I guess we'll just use tofu instead of meat, but he'd never trained a vegetarian before. So here's what I look like before. That's not Thomas, but he's fine with it. He's a friend of mine that I made in LA. But that's what I looked like before. I wasn't, super overweight, but I was about a size 11. And still sick. And I followed what he told me to do for 3.5 months. And the cool thing was I went from a size 11 to a size 3 in that time. That's the day before we got married at Twin Falls in Maui. You guys know that, the flat spot? He looked good too, I know. He was, yeah. I didn't say, he's a hot nerd. I didn't mention that, yeah. So, but even better than that was I felt the best I'd ever felt my whole life. I no longer had arthritis. I didn't have the migraine headaches. I didn't have any rashes. I had so much energy, I could work a whole night, a 30-hour shift at the hospital, and then go to the gym afterwards. That's not normal for people who don't have lupus. So I felt so good. And then I went to the doctor, and I had a new rheumatologist out in California because I'd been trained in Pennsylvania. And I went to the rheumatologist, and he ran some lab work for me, and he said, there must have been a mistake in the labs because these labs are not positive for lupus or negative for lupus. And I saw your chart and you obviously have it. So he goes, I don't know what's wrong. You just go to your wedding, come back and we'll retest everything and I said, okay. So I went to the wedding, I came back, retested everything, and it's still negative for lupus. And now my blood clot antibodies are gone too. And then, by the way, my high cholesterol was now normal. I was told in my 20s my cholesterol was high because of genetics, not because I ate so much cheese. Magically, my cholesterol is better too. And nobody could figure out what happened because the only thing I changed was my diet. And I had just graduated medical school, so I knew that diet had nothing to do with health. So we couldn't figure out what it could be. So I just kind of went on that way and I just enjoyed feeling good. And I finished my residency and let me see, I'll show you. So that's our wedding out in Maui. And it was just a beautiful day. I mean, we both cried through the whole thing and it was really, really beautiful. So I'm healthy now for 4 years after the wedding, and I get this crazy idea in my head. I'm really feeling good, and I thought, well, what if we get pregnant? And my husband goes, what? You told me when we met that that was a death sentence, that you can't have children, and you're healthy now, you're doing well. Why would we mess with that? And I said, I know, but I can feel that I'm healthy now. And he's like, yeah, that's great. But all the doctors say that you're going to get sick again sometime soon and we shouldn't mess with it. And I said, yeah, but I know I am. I know I am. My mom volunteered to carry the baby for me. My best friend volunteered to carry the baby for me. My husband didn't understand how it worked. And he's like, they're very attractive, but I don't think I can do this. But I insisted, and he really, really didn't want to do it. But you can convince a man. And anyway, so I did get pregnant. And here's the thing. So I go to the OBGYN and I'm pregnant now. And she asked me my health history. And I said, well, I used to have lupus. And she said, what? You don't used to have lupus. You have lupus. So she sent me to the high-risk OB. High-risk OB sent me back because she goes, this lady's healthy. She doesn't have lupus. So they were just obsessively following me. And all the doctors said is going to come back while you're pregnant. So you should start medication again because I'd gone off medication. I still took it for a year after my labs were negative because they told me that I had lupus even though my tests were negative. And apparently, according to Western medicine, if you ever have lupus and then no longer have it, you still have it. So, because it's incurable. So It's very confusing. Or if you go to the Lupus Foundation website, if you have lupus and then you don't have it anymore, you never had it to begin with. So it's all very confusing. So my doctor said, you're going to need to go on medicines while you're pregnant. And I said, well, I don't want to go on medicine. It doesn't make sense. Because I looked at my labs, right? And so I don't know if you can read this, but 2004 was right before I changed my diet. Positive antibodies for blood clots, positive dsDNA, which is a lupus antibody. But here I am in 2008 pregnant and it's negative for blood clot antibodies. And then 2004, it's positive ANA, which is autoimmune antibodies. But then 2008 pregnant, it's negative. So if my blood tests say that I don't have it, well, I don't want to take medicines while I'm pregnant. So I decided not to. I said, I don't want to die. If I start getting sick, I'll take it. So then I get through the whole pregnancy, get to the end of the pregnancy, and my son is breech. He's butt first. So I have to go get a C-section. So he entered the world butt first, and if you met him, you'd understand why. But he was born healthy. That's my son, Solomon. And I know he's so cute. And the doctors were like standing around waiting for something to happen. And I just felt fine. I felt really good. I went home after a couple of days and I told my doctor, I said, wow, you are an amazing surgeon, because my patients that get C-sections always tell me how bad it hurts and how long it takes them to get better. And I feel fine. And she said, hey, listen, I'm a great surgeon. Which, by the way, you want a cocky surgeon. You don't want someone nervous cutting you open. You want them to be very full of themselves. But she said, I'm a great surgeon, but you have an unusual ability to heal, because I've never seen someone get better that fast. Which for me was shocking, because with lupus, I could never heal anything. I had a pimple that turned into a giant abscess because I couldn't even heal a bacteria in a pimple. And here I am healing from major surgery the same day because I'm so healthy. So I went home. Didn't really think much more about it. I'm still healthy. I'm producing enough milk to make this guy really fat and donate to 4 other families as well. And about 9 days later, exactly 9 days later, it's my birthday. It was my 32nd birthday. And my mom was there to be with the baby. And she told me to go out and enjoy my birthday. And she said, listen, he's sleeping. Go to dinner. As soon as he wakes up, I'll call you and you'll come right back and nurse him. Because I didn't want to leave his side, first baby. So I'm like, well, what am I going to wear? I haven't gotten out of pajamas since I gave birth. And you guys have babies, like you don't even bother getting dressed, right? Just pajamas, right? So I go and I'm like, what am I going to wear? So I go in my closet and I pick up my pre-pregnancy jeans and I put them on and they fit. So this is 9 days after I gave birth and I'm wearing my pre-pregnancy jeans. I had gained 40 pounds pregnant and it was just gone. This was finally when it clicked for my husband and I that something had changed. It took us this long. That's why I always say, don't be mad at your doctors if they don't understand that it's possible to reverse diseases, because it took me this long and it was my body. But it's not normal for someone with lupus to have a healthy pregnancy and childbirth and still not have lupus. And it's definitely not normal for somebody who gave birth to be back in their pre-pregnancy clothes less than 2 weeks after they give birth. And so my husband and I finally realized that there was something very unusual about my body, that it was responding in real time to whatever changes I asked for, whatever challenges that appeared. When I was pregnant, I was pregnant. When I gave birth, then I healed up really quick. All of those things were happening in real time. And the only thing we'd ever changed was my diet. And so we decided that we had to figure out what exactly happened. What did I stop eating that could have been making me sick? And what did I start eating that could possibly accelerate cellular repair and the anti-inflammatory immune system? And when we went into it, and I'd never even heard of plant-based doctors or nutrition. We did this all on our own. We went back and studied the cellular biology of how all foods affect the cells. And we realized that we'd accidentally created the most anti-inflammatory nutrition plan ever. That was impossible. So we decided that we needed to do something with this. And so we started testing it on people to see if we could get the same results. And we could. We could get people to have a dramatic change in their health within 3 to 4 weeks. Some people completely eliminating the disease completely. So we decided to dedicate ourselves to that. And by the way, a few years later, I decided to do it again. That was me 2 days before giving birth to my second son, Alex. And my husband said, I'm the happiest pregnant person you've ever seen. Because I was told I could never have babies. So even when I'm throwing up, I'm smiling. He said he's never seen someone smile while they vomit, but at least it's not chemo. I was throwing up because it's a baby. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So this is my family. And there's my Alex and Solomon and Tom and me. And because of what I learned, I now get to live a full life. This is now 14 years later and I'm still lupus free. I had lupus for 12 years straight, serious disease that almost killed me multiple times. And it's now 14 years that I don't have any disease at all. So I realized I need to dedicate my life to this. I need to teach other people how to do this, because there are millions of people all over the world that are suffering and dying from diseases that they don't have to. And there's people losing people they love that they don't need to lose, because the information is there, they just don't have it. So I decided that I needed to commit myself to this. And that's what I've been doing for the past decade, is repeating this with other people and helping them get their life back. So the first 3 steps are all about not getting sicker, right? Because, like when my husband gives talks about rapid fat loss, he always says, okay, I'm going to teach you the secrets to rapid fat loss. And step number 1 is stop getting fatter. And everyone's like, what? And then, okay, it kind of makes sense, right? So step number 1 to healing is to stop getting sicker, right? So it means stop eating unhealthy foods. And what are unhealthy foods? I'm going to kind of run through these because I'm guessing it's a vegetarian society. You probably heard that meat's not good for you. You probably heard that dairy's not good for you, right? Absolutely the case. So dairy is even worse than meat, but they're both really, really bad for you. They really are inflammatory. And again, I'll go into detail in the free classes, but I want you to get the basics down, okay? Processed foods. They cause an immediate immune response. Your body doesn't know what those things are. So processed foods are like things that your grandmother wouldn't have ever eaten, something that has chemicals in it, something that doesn't go bad, doesn't mold, right? All of those things. So processed foods and oils. When you add oils to foods, you dramatically feed into your inflammation. I'm going to show you why this is, okay? Now, you've probably heard a lot of plant-based doctors talk about heart disease and other things, but what gets me really excited is the immune system. That is my favorite thing. So I talk about how things create inflammation. So I'm going to show you a scientific pathway right now, but I don't want anybody to get nervous or fall asleep because they're like, oh, yeah. Right? So I just want to show it to you so that you can understand how it works, but I don't want you guys to write down the pathway, okay? There's always someone who doesn't listen to me. I want you to just kind of take it in, okay? So this is the inflammatory pathway, all right? So arachidonic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid that is the precursor or the ingredient that creates our inflammatory immune system, right? Now you need an inflammatory immune system. Your inflammatory immune system is what gets activated, like if you get an infection. So if you get a bacterial infection or a viral infection, you get a fever, right? That's your inflammatory immune system turning on so it could kill the thing. So you do want an inflammatory immune system. The problem is when your inflammatory immune system is turned on all the time, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks all the time, then it actually takes over and starts creating damage, okay? So here's what happens is that the more arachidonic acid you eat, so it comes from oils and processed foods and all animal products, right? The more of it you eat, the more enzymes you create, all right? Now, these enzymes break it down into the ingredients, all right? Everybody still with me? So the enzymes break arachidonic acid down into the parts of our inflammatory immune system here, okay? So leukotriene B4, thromboxane E2, prostaglandin E2. Again, you don't need to know that. But the more arachidonic acid you have, the more of these enzymes you create because you have to break it down. So you need more enzymes to break it down. And the more of these anti-inflammatory immune system that you have. Does that make sense so far? Okay, cool. Now the problem is that all of these things have jobs that they do that then go haywire if there's too many. So for example, 5-LOX is involved in cellular growth. Now we need cells to grow when you damage them, right? You bang your knee, you need to fix the cells, grow new cells. But if you have too much 5-LOX, you're going to get more cancer growth because you're growing too many cells. And if you have too much 5-LOX, you're going to have too much leukotriene. And this one here creates tons of inflammation, inflammatory bowel disease, asthma, atherosclerosis, heart attacks, chronic inflammation, destruction of healthy tissue, arthritis, edema, pain. There's more, but it ran out of room on the slide. So if you have any of this stuff or this stuff, you're eating too much of this stuff. Make sense? Cool. Now, COX-1 is involved with blood clots. It's important to have blood clots, right? If you cut yourself, if you don't make blood clots, you will bleed out. But if you have too much COX-1, what do you think happens? Heart attacks, strokes. Now, if you have COX-2 here, COX-2 is involved in vascular genesis, creating blood vessels. Again, if you get injured, you want to fix the blood vessel. But if you have too much COX-2, you're going to get more cancer growth because you're going to create more blood supply to cancer. And if you have too much prostaglandin E2, you're going to have more cancer, more irritable bowel disease, more chronic inflammation and pain. So again, if you have any of these things, it's because you're eating too much of these things. And by the way, I learned this pathway in medical school. What I didn't learn was where it came from. Well, they never taught us where arachidonic acid came from. They just taught us this pathway. And then right here, they taught me which medications to use to block the enzymes. So that's what I learned. Like, okay, Vioxx will stop COX-2 and aspirin stops COX-1, right? So that's what I learned. And none of us in my class of over 100 people ever thought to ask, well, where does it come from? And can we just shut it off that way? So if you, that's why your doctor doesn't talk to you about it. It's just because they don't know. They never thought to ask. They put so much information in your head in medical school, you don't know that anything's missing, right? How would you know that? Now, the other thing you want to do if you're trying to get better is to add healing foods. This, by the way, is what's missing from most plant-based diets when people get sick who are already plant-based. So let me ask you this. How many of you are already plant-based but still have some health issues that you haven't been able to get rid of? It's okay, guys. It's okay to be honest about it. I treat a lot of people now that are plant-based or vegan and have health issues because when they don't get better, they come to me because my understanding is on the cellular biology of how foods work in the body. And so I have vegan doctors and vegan celebrities who come to me when they get sick on the DL because they need to get better. And they're afraid that people will think, oh, plant-based isn't the key to getting better. That's not the case. I'll give you an example. Ellen Jaffe-Jones. How many of you guys know her? She lets me talk about it. So she's a, nope. So she is a famous vegan athlete. She has written tons of books. She wrote a book called Vegan for $4 a Day. It was a New York Times bestseller. And she used to be a chef for the McDougall program, teaching people how to cook plant-based food. So she's been plant-based for like decades. And just this past year, she got psoriasis. So she went to Dr. Khan, who out in Detroit, and he texted me, this is Ellen, fix her, which that's how New Yorkers and Northeast people talk. That's just like very to the point. And I said, okay, cool, I'll do that. So with her, she was not eating any animal products. And that's probably why it took her so long to get psoriasis, because she's in her 60s and she probably would have gotten it much younger. But she wasn't eating enough of the healing foods that allowed her body to repair itself. And so she eventually still got sick. What I can tell you, though, is 2 weeks later after adding what I told her to, the psoriasis went away completely. All the plaques are gone. I just saw her at a conference. I saw her for the first time in person because I see everybody online now. That's all I do is I work online and see people from all over the world from my computer. And it was the first time I got to hug her. And she put my face into all of her slides and her talks. This is a lady who saved my life. But, you know, so a lot of times when people are plant-based, they're missing this. And definitely when people are not plant-based, they're missing this. So, so the healing foods are super important. And that's why I want to focus our time. So the first thing you need to do, which most people don't do, plant-based or not, is eat raw vegetables. Now, the #1 most commonly eaten vegetable in the US is ketchup. Yep. And that's followed by French fries. And raw vegetables, unheard of. So maybe a piece of lettuce on the burger. Maybe it's the kale that decorates the salad bar, right? So what I found is that raw vegetables specifically have a powerful potential to reverse illness quickly. They are, when it comes from the earth, the way it was created for us, or the way it was grown from the earth, it's intact. The vitamins, all the phytonutrients. You know, when the first medications came from the rainforest, right? It turns out what we need to heal actually grows on the planet itself, was not created in the lab. So when it comes out, nature, it works really well. And I have people focus on, you know, when I look at nutrient density, that means like how much good power is in the food. The most powerful foods you can eat are green leafy vegetables like spinach and kale and chard, and cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower. And when people do programs with me, I have them eat, I start them out at about 8 cups a day of raw vegetables. And by the time they get rolling, it's like 10 to 12 cups a day. That's what I ate to get better, by the way, about 10 to 12 cups of raw vegetables a day. How many of you guys eat that much raw vegetables a day? Right. Okay. So exactly. So if you find that you are either not having good energy, you're overweight and can't seem to lose it, or you're having a lot of inflammation in your body and you're missing your raw vegetables, you should be looking at that. And I really recommend when people are sick, you know, if you're healthy, you know, try to add at least half your plate to come from that. If you're sick, 80% or more. Right. So most people, their salad's like this big, and then they're like meat or pastas the rest of the plate. I want you to reverse that, have a big salad and maybe just put a little bit of like beans or cooked vegetables or something with it. You'll find that you feel better than you could ever imagine. It's really powerful how good you feel. The next thing is water. Most people are walking around severely dehydrated. severely dehydrated. And when you're dehydrated, number one is you can't actually reverse the disease because all of the chemical pathways that are necessary for healing require water as an ingredient. So even if you imagine eating 10 cups of vegetables a day and still not getting better because you didn't drink enough water. That's a bummer, right? So you really want to get your water for that reason. Number two, being dehydrated is the number one cause of the most expensive, or I guess the most lucrative drug sales we have. So number one is the most common cause of headaches. When you're low in water, your body will pull water out of the cells up here and it causes your brain to tug on the sides of your head. So oftentimes you have a headache or migraine, just drinking a couple liters of water can clear it up. And it's also the number one cause of constipation. So you think about how much money is made in medications for constipation and headaches, right? Constipation is a big one, and it causes a lot of distress because there's a lot of people walking around really grumpy and mad because they can't poop. And it's affecting marriages, and it's affecting lives. Water is supposed to be absorbed in your large intestine. And so your poop's supposed to come out like a lazy river on a nice little watery trail, right? So the water's supposed to guide it out. And if you're not drinking enough water, it gets stuck. Like, do you ever see one of those, those tubular slides they have at water parks, right? It's like if you were trying to go down one of those slides without any water in it, right? You'd just be like, ugh, right? That's what's happening if you're not drinking enough water. So if you find that you are pushing and you can't get your poop out, you're probably dehydrated. And the most common symptom of dehydration is lack of thirst. So when someone says, I don't drink because I'm just not thirsty, then I know for sure they're dehydrated. Because when people get on my program and I get them drinking 96 to 128 ounces a day, they're thirsty all the time. I have to tell them to slow down. So for healing, I usually recommend people have at least 96 ounces of water a day. You might have already figured out between all the fiber from the raw vegetables and the water, you're in the bathroom a lot. You're peeing and pooping as your next job. Can't fix that, guys. If you want to heal with food, it has to go in and it has to come out. So I haven't figured out a solution for that yet. I know I was in the bathroom a lot when I was healing, but it was worth it. I had the energy. It was all right. So, and the other thing that's missing from most diets and even plant-based diets is omega-3 fatty acids. I recommend people get them from flax and chia seeds. But how many of you guys have heard that, you should avoid all fats, eat super low fat diets? A lot of the plant-based docs will say that too. So unfortunately, omega-3s are kind of the baby that got thrown out with the bathwater when it comes to fats. So oils are bad for you. Saturated fats from animal products are bad for you. Omega-3s are essential, and I'm going to show you why really quick. So number one, they become a part of your cell membranes. So every cell in your body is filled with water. And then you have a phospholipid membrane around it that's made of fats. And that's to keep your cells waterproof, right? So you don't dissolve. You would be a puddle on the floor if you didn't have that. Now, omega-6 fats make your cells really rigid. So again, omega-6 comes from animal products and oils, right? Omega-3s make your cells really flexible so that when there's a signal that comes to your cell, it can receive it. It won't bounce off of it like it will if it's full of omega-6. And you can release toxins. So I'll show you here. So here's a healthy membrane with a lot of omega-3s. Nutrients go in and toxins come out. That's normal. But if you're omega-3 deprived, which most people are because you can't make omega-3s, you have to eat them, then you get a really tough membrane that nutrients can't get into. So you're eating 10 cups of vegetables a day and you can't even get any nutrients out of it. That's not going to work really well. And you're full of toxins. So it's also why people go through a detox period. Usually when they switch to my plan, they eat tons of omega-3s, they eat tons of nutrients, and all of a sudden they feel worse. It's not because the veggies are bad for them. It's because they're suddenly releasing all the toxins they've been carrying around. So it's kind of like the childbirth of getting healthy. You get worse and then it gets better afterwards. Another thing about omega-3s are really good for brain health. I'm not going to go into that too far here, but it does protect against dementia as well. And what really gets me excited is what it does for the immune system. So this is the source of your anti-inflammatory immune system. So if you think about what I told you, if you're eating tons of foods that give you inflammatory immune cells, right? So you're eating all the animal products and processed foods and oils, and you're making all this inflammation, and then you need omega-3s to get rid of it, but most people aren't eating any of them at all, which makes sense why everybody's sick, right? Because we're creating inflammation every day, but we can't get rid of it. So I'm going to show you another one of those little chemical pathways to show you how it works again. You guys aren't scared this time because it was okay last time. So flax and chia seeds, they create something called ALA. And when we go down the pathway, it creates EPA and DHEA. Have you guys heard that? That's the omega-3s people have usually heard of, right? And that creates our anti-inflammatory immune cells. So that's the leukotriene B5 and prostaglandin E3. So I'm going to show you something really cool before we finish up here about how I actually hack people's health and why people get better so fast with me, because we get results faster than anyone. 3 to 6 weeks, I can usually create a dramatic change, if not complete change of people's health. This is part of why, because I hack into the omega-3 pathway, okay? So you guys ready for this? It's so cool. Okay, I get excited. I don't know if you guys are excited, but I'm excited. So these are those two pathways side by side, but nobody's nervous anymore, right? So that's the omega-6 pathway. Remember this? This is the vegetable oils, and it's, that creates the arachidonic acid that creates the inflammatory pathway, right? You guys remember that? Yeah. And then this is the omega-3 pathway. Flax and chia seeds come down, ALA, and create the anti-inflammatory pathway. Have you guys ever been told or heard that you can't convert flax or chia seeds into omega-3s efficiently? Have you guys ever heard that? Yeah, so this is why that tends to be the case. Because ALA and LA up here, they use the same enzyme to create their products. And this enzyme prefers the omega-6 pathway. I don't know why. Maybe it had a fight with ALA at some point in the past, but it really likes LA better. And if you eat animal fats and processed foods, even if you have a little bit of flax or chia, you're going to preferentially create the inflammatory immune cells. But when people are on my plan, we get rid of the oils and animal products and processed foods, right? And that leaves this entire enzyme, and we'll go over here. So bam, look at that. Oh my God, there's so much EPA, DHA, and now we're getting a huge amount of the anti-inflammatory cells made. Isn't that cool? So cool. And even more exciting is when you create EPA, it actually inhibits the breakdown of arachidonic acid into the inflammatory immune cells. So when you give up the animal products and the processed foods and you start flooding your body with omega-3s, you actually preferentially create an anti-inflammatory effect in your body, which is why people get better so fast, because they're not creating any inflammation and they're actively getting rid of it on a daily basis. So if you guys aren't eating omega-3s, it's time to start chowing down on these. I usually get people to eat about half a cup a day to start. And then when their gut adjusts, I start increasing it from there. So it's really, really, really important. If you find that you get constipated with too much seeds, you can also use a cold pressed flax oil. You got to keep that stuff refrigerated though, because it breaks down quickly. So those are the basics of the steps, and I go into the science more deeply either in my book of By Lupus or when you come to my free classes so you can understand more about it. But I wanted to give you that because I think it's something that, you know, a lot of people don't, well, I know nobody else teaches this pathway, and I think it's important to understand. You know, I was one of those people that I always have to know why. I don't like just being told what to do. Maybe it's the New Yorker in me, I don't know. But I like to know, I love science and I love teaching science. So I thought you found that, hope you found that exciting.